Hello everyone, welcome to this fly tying video. Today we're going to tie the ghost streamer, and this is a quite small Zonker streamer with a little bit of laser dub in front. And this fly I did not have the intention, but it turned out to look pretty similar to Holger Lachmann's The Burner. There are a few things that changed, but the overall shape of these Zonker with laser dub flies always remain the same. This one is not going to be weighted, but you could also use just a little bit of lead-free wire and to add some weight to the fly. The hook I'm using is the Hanák H950BL. This is a streamer XL. It has a quite wide gape, a straight eye. I like my streamers to have straight eyes. The thread I'm using is the Nanosilk from Semperfli, 12/0 in white. So I'm just going to start catching the thread. And here I'm going to put down just a base so that we can tie all the other materials onto later. So bring the thread down all the way to the start of the bend, and here we can then cut off the excess. This version of the fly is going to be in a color that I call baby Browntrout, and this is this little trout imitation with a lot of brown and red in it, just to imitate the natural. So here for the end I'm going to mix two different dubbings. So for the hotspot or little tag here at the end I'm going to use two kinds of dubbing. The first one is this Prism SLF dubbing. This one is in the color Fluo Fire Orange. And the next one is some Rite dubbing. This is actually a very fine dubbing for dry flies, but in the color dark reddish brown, but it can be used almost like the Senyo's laser dub that we use in front. This dubbing has these long synthetic fibers, and mixed in with the brown, this red brown, or some green highlights as well, so it works really well for this purpose. So here I'm just taking a little bunch. I'm also going to take a little bit of this SLF Prism, and these fibers are quite long as well. I've taken a pinch. Here you also want to have a nice taper on your fly, and this will occur quite naturally. So leave this aside for now, and I'm going to grab the fly Rite, and here I'm going to just make a few turns to catch this dubbing, just this little hotspot, or not a hotspot, but a trail on the fly, and here comes the hotspot. So over the other dubbing I'm just going to add this Fluo Orange, and I'm doing it this way so we have the brown on the underside, and this is only to attenuate a little bit of this really bright dubbing. I just think it makes for a little more than natural looking fly, but with some fluorescent fibers as well. And then I'm going to take the thread up, binding down all these materials. So here you have to do touching turns and try to bind down all these materials at once. And if you do it this way, you're also going to have a nice underbody where you can then tie all the rest of the materials. So I'm going to tie this up the whole length of the body. And this is to prevent any bumps happening right here. So now we have a smooth body, and then when we reach about half a centimeter from the eye, I'm going to just cut the material off, and then continue with some quite heavy turns. And there we have the tag tied in. Now I'm just going to go back the whole way, binding this down even further, and this is going to really hold. You can also brush these together just a little bit to make for a nice blend. Then I'm going to grab the main, or one of the two main materials of the fly, and this is a Zonker Strip. I don't know what this color is called, but it's quite a brown natural color, and it works really well for imitating a little brown trout. So here we want to measure the length of this to be the length of the hook, and also extending just a little bit. So I'm going to have this going from right about here to about the middle, or just a little bit longer down this hotspot. And then what you have to do is to reach in with your scissors and try to stay as close to the skin as possible, and then cut it off. And this way you will not cut the hairs that are on the upper side. Then what I like to do is, instead of leaving the end just flat like this, I'm just going to cut it into a point, and this way it will have a nice taper to it, and I think this will move just a little bit better in the water, as it's going to have a little bit less material right at the tip. Maybe it doesn't matter, but I like to do it. It gives a little neater looking fly as well. Now I'm going to tie the Zonker Strip in right at the back of the fly. And to do this we have to separate the hairs in two clumps. So one that's going to be here at the back, and one that's going to be the body. And here you have to find exactly the spot where you have this piece of skin, the above part or the front part, to be right where you want it. Then wet your fingers, and we can then move the hairs to be right in the exact spot, and just keep them a little bit more manageable. Then 1 turn, 2 turns, and 3 turns, and here you really have to pull down on this. And with this thread I'm not worried it's going to break, so I can just pull on it as much as I want. And here I have the Zonker Strip tied in. Even though this is really firmly tied in, I'm just going to add a little bit of varnish, or hard as nails in this case. You can never be too sure on these streamers, so always use some kind of super glue or varnish, just to make sure every material stays right in place. And for now we can just leave this Zonker Strip hanging out the back, so just pull it back a little bit and out of the way. Then I'm going to tie in a rib, and this is going to be composed of 2 materials. First a small copper wire, I'm just going to take this down a little bit, tie it in on my side, and I'm also going to add some glitter thread. This is from Eyez. I don't know if they make it anymore, but I found it on sale, so I just bought some colors. And here it works quite well for this one. And these ribs are then going to bind down the dubbing just a little bit, so it won't move anywhere. For the dubbing I'm going with my trusted Trout mix, and here we will have to put on quite a bit, because for the streamers what you want is to have, or to overdo the dubbing and then to brush it out. At least that's what I like to do on my streamers. Here I'm going to add quite a good amount of dubbing, and you don't have to dub this on too tight. Just get it on there, and then I'm starting right at the back, catching the dubbing, and then I'm going to go forward, building up the body. And here I'm going to try to make like a football shape, slightly oval. And here, as I have the camera, I can't do this at once, but just add all the dubbing at the same time if you don't have any space confinements. And here I did not have enough, so I'm just going to add a little bit more. You can always add more. It's the easiest thing to do. It's easier than taking it away if you have too much. So if you're not sure about how much dubbing you need, just do it in a few small steps instead of adding too much at once. And then we want this to stop a few millimeters behind the eye. Just leave enough space to tie down all the materials, and then we're going to tie in a head of laser dub as well. And here I'm going to bring up the rib, or the two ribs at the same time, just keeping these together. And with open spiral turns I'm going to really pull on these, and these are going to hold down the dubbing when I brush it out in just a few seconds. When you reach the thread, put a 90-degree bend into the two wires, tie these off. The glitter thread you have to cut off, but use the inner or back part of your scissors, and then the wire can just be helicoptered off. Few more turns to secure, and then here comes the fun part. We have to brush out all this dubbing, and I'm going to brush this just a little bit down, and this is going to leave a quite flat spot here at the top, and this is exactly what I want, because I'm going to glue the Zonker skin onto the dubbing. So there, it's brushed out enough, and then we're going to bring this over, but first I'm going to add a little bit of the same varnish, and this is going to prevent any of this coming undone. You could also rib through with a wire, and I would do this on bigger flies, but on this one it works quite well just to glue this on. So I'm putting down a quite good amount so it doesn't soak up into the skin too much, and then I'm just going to pull this over, and here you really have to pull on it, and then holding it with my two fingers, and then going to make a few really heavy turns here right in front, binding down the skin. So there we have this tied in, and this is not going to go anywhere, and especially with this thread it's so great that you can really pull on it and not being afraid that it will break. Pull down as hard as you can, and this is going to bind down this little strip of skin here right at the front, and as you can see it makes for a really neat little head, and you could even leave the fly like this and it wouldn't look too off. But on this one I'm also going to add a little bit of dubbing in front, and what I like to do is to add just a little bit more of the varnish at the head area, and this is going to really secure this fly. Use as much super glue or varnish as needed, and you can't really have too much on streamers. These are meant to be fishing for bigger fish, so it's really nice to have a durable fly. And as well, with these quite big flies, you spend a little bit more time on them, and also maybe a little bit more money depending on the materials that you use. So it's always nice to have a secure fly. And then once the head has dried a little bit, I'm going to grab both the Senyo's laser dub in dark tan, this really great dubbing, and the same used for the tag, this Fly Rite in the dark reddish color. And the red brown is going to be the back of the fly, but first I'm going to take the dark tan laser dub, and these come, or the structure of this is these really long fibers. It looks almost like wool, and here as well as for the tag I'm going to card this or pull these apart and then back together, and this is going to roughly align all the fibers in the same direction. And here for the head you really have to feel how big of a bunch you need, but just try to keep these as small as possible. You don't want to overdo this. And the first one I'm going to tie in is the one on the underside. So 50 to the back, 50 to the front. 2 hard turns, and here I'm going to make sure this is on the underside, but just a little bit around the hook as well. Then turn your vise over if you have a rotary function. It really helps with these flies. I'm going to do exactly the same, but on the top. But here maybe you can use a little less dubbing, just because we're going to add the other one as well. So I'm doing the exact same thing, just pulling these apart and then back together. And as for the underside, 50 to the back, 50% to the front. 2 hard turns, then make sure it's on the top but a little bit down the sides. The idea here is to keep a quite high profile on the fly, but not a thick one. It will like swim from side to side. And then once we've tied these down with a few really heavy turns, then pull back both the upper and lower part of this dubbing, and I'm going to bring this back and then get your thread through, and we're going to make a few turns in front. And don't worry if you see a little bit of thread in between the 2 clumps. It's going to be a big eye here, so you won't see anything. A few turns and stroke these back as you go, and these will blend together really nicely, and you won't see the thread barely at all. And then the last thing is to grab this Fly Rite, or you could also use some laser dub in a darker color. I only had this available, or I had this available, so I'm going to use this. And here these are not so tapered, so I'm just going to taper this manually, and exactly as we did for the laser dub, I'm going to tie this in. 2 heavy turns right on top, 50% to the front and then 50 to the back. And then I'm going to bring this back as well, and here you can see that it makes for a nice back to the fly. And then a few really heavy turns in front. The last thing to do is to whip finish, and here you don't need to put any varnish or glue onto the thread. This is all going to be sealed down later with both the eyes and some UV resin and all kinds of different glues. So 3 turns, pull tight and cut off. Now I'm going back with my Velcro, and I'm going to brush all this dubbing together to make a really nice mix, and also to make these stay exactly where I want them. And here, as you can see, it has a really wide profile in this way, or a high profile, but on this side it's not so thick. It's going to be even more of a slim profile or a slim fly when we put on the eyes. These are going to push down to both sides and keeping these really slim. So here I'm just brushing back all the dubbing and mixing it just a little bit, and this is also going to get rid of any fibers that are not so securely tied in. And here we can see that we have this nice dark reddish brown back and a little bit more tan bottom, and this is going to imitate the natural brown trout. It has a much darker back than the belly, and this is the same for all small fish or even the bigger ones. They usually have a lighter belly than back. And now I'm going to get this one out of the vise, and I'm just stroking the dubbing back, and I'm holding it like this, and then I'm going to grab this really runny glue, and I'm just going to soak the front part of the fly in this, and this is both going to secure the thread and also keeping the dubbing right where I want it. I want this leaning quite back. If you're holding it like this on the vertical, the gravity will just move this glue a little bit down into the fibers, and it's going to have a nice effect, or having right here at the eye being quite hard and secure, and then having these fibers not so glued down as you go. This is going to give a nice motion to the fly once it's in the water, and you can see now that we have this quite slim profile. So for now I'm going to let this dry, and you have to let this dry completely before doing the next step, which is adding the eyes. And this glue that I put in here is also going to help with this part, as it's going to make a little base here on both sides that you can glue on the eyes to. If you would just have it like this without this first gluing, the next glue, if you're not using a really gel-like glue, it's going to soak down into the fibers and just bind the fibers together or the dubbing together without really keeping the eyes in place. So, and now once this has dried, we can now add the eyes, and here I'm using these gator eyes from Deercreek, and these are these yellow-red eyes with a big pupil, and these are the 6mm, and these work really well for this size 6 hook. They are quite big, but I like them to be a little bit bigger, or this whole area I want covered with the eyes. So I'm just going to use my dubbing needle to pick these up, and then I'm going to place these where I want them. So it's going to look like this. To put these in, I have this old hardest nails, and this has stayed open quite a bit, so it's really thick and not runny at all. So it's perfect for this purpose, because here what you want is quite a gel-like glue. You could also use the sap gel. Here I'm just going to put down a drop of glue into the middle of the eye, and here I want quite a substantial amount. So I really want this to be a securely attached eye. So I'm just adding this on one side, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other one. So a nice drop of glue, or varnish in this case, and you could also use your dubbing needle to just keep this in place as you glue it, but I've just gotten used to do it like this, and then putting on the eye on the other side, and these eyes have, the pupil is a little bit off center, so I'm just going to move these around so they face the right direction, and then I'm going to squeeze down gently on both sides. I'm going to use a little bit of foam just to hold this in place, and then with the clip I'm going to just hold this like this, and I'm only doing this because I just tried it with a clip and it made a little mark in the eye, so now I'm just using this little piece of foam to not have to ruin the eyes as I glue them. And here we have the eyes put in, and here you can see the nice slim profile from this side and the quite wide one from this, and this is going to have the effect that the fly will really swim in the water, especially if you fish these in a current. What I would do is to leave these eyes to dry completely before doing the next step, but here I'm going to add the UV resin as well, and here I'm using the Deercreek Diamond Fine Flex, and this works really well on doing these heads on the fly, as it has this little bit of flex in it, and it's going to keep the fly or keep the head from breaking. It's just going to bounce off the rocks instead of smashing into it, so it's going to have a lot less chance of cracking or chipping. So a little drop on the upper side, right in between the eyes. You don't want to have this go down too much into the fly. Then turn it upside down. And here I see that I have some dubbing fibers that are sticking out, so I'm just going to cut these off. And this is to prevent too much of the UV resin to stay in these little stray fibers. So a little drop on the underside as well. Set it with the UV torch, and here you can also move the dubbing around just a little bit, keeping it a little slimmer or a little wider. This depends on how you want your fly to look. But there we have the underside done as well, and this fly can be tied in a wide variety of colors. Here I have one that I call the cotton candy. This is one of my favorites. I also tie it in this gray color, and this one is the baby grayling with some purple highlights. Then the ones that I started this pattern with are these northern lights, and this is some purple and green, really not representing anything but a nice attractor pattern. And also for the night fishing, this black one with an orange hotspot called the Midnight Sun, and this is really great for night fishing, as the sky is always the brightest part in the night, the brightest area. So the fish, when it sees a fly from underneath, it's going to see only the profile, and the black or dark flies are going to have a much more pronounced profile from underneath. So it's maybe a little weird to fish with dark flies when it's dark outside, but it really works. So there we have the ghost in the color baby brown trout, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time, and happy time.